start then. To remind members that as this meeting is held in public session, all public sessions are recorded, and all electronic devices, with the exception of the new tablets, interfere with the recording equipment. So even keeping your phones silent isn't sufficient. And if there was members in the public gallery, I would advise them the same. So, in terms of the overview for today, is the committee will receive 3 departmental briefings today on the following issues: off-street parking and the functions for district councils bill, strategic draining infrastructure and infraction risk, Dungannon integrated transport pilot project, and we also have 2 pieces of subordinate legislation to consider. Agenda item 1 would be apologies, and there is written apology in for David McNary.
No others received, Chair.
Alex Easton did say to me yesterday, and I thought he said he would be here, but he'd be leaving early, and I know other couple of members have indicated they'll be leaving early, but I don't think there's any necessity to record that, except when they leave.
No.
Just in terms of Chairman's business today, he's not actually here, but I think, well, Kieran has been in the committee, obviously, for a period of time, and that went through the Assembly on Tuesday in terms of Kieran's department, and Chris will be joining us. So in Kieran's absence, I'm sure the members would be content if I actually wish Kieran all the best in terms of wherever he went after here, and for the contributions that he made to the committee in the period of time that he was here. Maybe in terms of also then we have Brenda Hale, who was on this for a period of time as well, and she's been replaced through the Assembly on Tuesday as well. So if we could suggest that we actually write a note to both those members, if that's in order.
Agreed.
Also, maybe just for information, members, that I had a meeting last Thursday where I met the senior officials of the department, accompanied with the clerk of the committee, where they give us a brief outline. Well, it wasn't that brief because it probably lasted about an hour and a half, but it turned in a detailed background in terms of the difficulties that the department are facing over the coming months, given the pressures. And it was actually very interesting for me and very informative in terms of giving me maybe a different perspective on some of the pressures that are coming forward. And it was, I have to say, it was useful, and it was also useful to meet those officials. And I think there's other maybe follow-ups coming on from the back of that. Also, I had a meeting on Tuesday morning, just before the plenary started, with officials from TransLink, and I think it was just a get-to-know-you meeting. There was a suggestion in terms of maybe a further meeting with them, with the committee, in terms particularly for new members. I'm sure it'll be open to all members, but maybe you can a wee bit more background in terms of TransLink and the work that's going on there. But again, it was useful to meet those officials. We had a bit of conversation around some of the figures that come up in the October monitoring round, and it was useful maybe to hear from their perspective. And whilst I was critical in terms of the cash reserves they have, I think it is worth putting on record the investment that TransLink have in terms of infrastructure over the last number of years. And I mean, we did comment on that whenever we met them, in terms of the fleet, the buses, the trains. I think it has been good in terms of that investment. So again, that wasn't interesting.
Chairperson, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes when we are involved in constructive criticism, we tend to overlook. I mean, the achievements of TransLink in the last decade is remarkable. Certainly when I came here, the trains were being derailed frequently because the infrastructure was so bad. We've now got a modern fleet of trains behind ours. Some work is still to be done on the Derry line. The buses are good. So, you know, all that's pluses. And I do think we need a more detailed explanation of those reserves, because with a background in accountancy, but not claiming to know anything about TransLink's account, I do think we need to understand better what those reserves are about and what they're for.
I think that will be helpful. I mean, again, in that conversation we actually had, I think the clerk can keep it right. I think they talked about their purchasing 90 new vehicles a year. So I mean, there's a huge capital outlay in terms of investing in that infrastructure. But what I did remind them is actually having a good fleet and a good image, which should actually increase the passenger numbers, which should entail increase the profits. So whilst it's good to have healthy reserves, I think they should become whenever in terms of the good work that they do also.
Yes.
Remember, agenda item 3 is the draft minutes of the meeting on the 1st of October. And can I refer members to page 6 of their packs? And can I ask members if they agree that I agree these minutes? And
Great.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Agreed, yeah.
Agenda item 4 is correspondence. Can I refer members to page 12 in the main pack and page 2 in their table papers? Unless there's any objections or issues to raise, those items marked with the suggested approach to note shall simply be noted. Can I ask the clerk maybe just to brief us on the correspondence, or the key items? Of
Thank you, Chair. Item 1 is correspondence from Mr McNary regarding the Blue Badge scheme. Item 2 is correspondence from the Department regarding the Bicycle Strategy Seminar that's been held on Thursday of next week. It is table correspondence from the Department regarding the Committee for Education queries on PFG projects to promote walking and cycling to school.
Okay. Are the members content to note the items marked accordingly?
Yep.
And are the members content to confirm attendance at the bicycle seminar with the committee chair?
Yep.
Or sorry, committee office. Sorry. Just previously, John had raised about the, and I'm just processing that now in terms of TransLink. Is it in order then we just maybe contact TransLink to get a,
I've got it noted that we'll arrange follow-up.
so members are happy enough with that? Agenda item number 5, there's departmental briefing on off-street parking and the functions of District Council Bill. So can I refer members to page 16 of their pack and page 27 of their table papers. And can I welcome the officials then? We have Terry Dean, Sean McCall, Gary McKenna and David Miller. So gentlemen, I don't know who's actually leading off. Okay. So for about 10 minutes, maybe if you can wrap up at 10 and then we'll leave it to members for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We welcome the opportunity to brief the committee on the responses to the consultation on the off-street parking functions of District Council's Bill. You'll recall that we briefed the committee on the 4th of June prior to the consultation about the Bill's aims. As agreed, a copy of each response as received was forwarded to the committee together with a spreadsheet summarising the comments and the Department's responses to them, and also a copy of the SLA with councils, or the draft SLA with councils. To recap, the Bill proposes that certain powers which the Department presently exercises in respect of off-street car parks under the Road Traffic Regulation Northern Ireland Order 1997 and the Traffic Management Northern Ireland Order 2005 would, with effect from the 1st of April 2015, be exercised by the new councils. The Bill does not propose to change the Department's responsibilities for parking contraventions occurring in respect of park and ride or park and share car parks, and there are no proposals to change the existing enforcement regime in respect of parking contraventions occurring on public roads. Enforcement responsibility for those would remain with the Department. Under the Bill's proposals, each council would, in the future, have the power to appoint traffic attendants in respect of off-street car parks lying within its area. Although no common approach has yet emerged, it's anticipated that councils may ask the Department to continue to enforce parking contraventions on their behalf within those off-street parking places up until the expiry of the Department's existing contracts with the private sector in 2016. Existing local government legislation will enable that to take place. A transfer scheme being prepared in liaison with Department of Environment officials and in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act, Northern Ireland 2014, will arrange for the transfer to councils of assets including land, pay and display machines, barriers and systems of street lighting erected within the off-street car parks. In summary, the aims of the Bill were to provide the legislative framework to put what is the Executive's vision in place to transfer off-street car parks to the new councils and provide district councils with legislative powers enabling them to provide off-street car park spaces subject to demand, assume ownership of existing off-street car parks, operate and maintain them, and enforce parking contraventions within them. The bill will give the councils the necessary powers to operate the car parks and to make tariff changes for car parks under their control. This will be done by administrative order signed by an official of the council in question. Turn to the consultation on the bill. Taking into account the earlier consultation on the proposals contained within the Roads Miscellaneous Provisions 2010 bill, this bill was issued for consultation over a 6-week period commencing on the 23rd of June with the closing date of Friday the 8th of August. In total, 17 responses were received to the consultation, mostly from existing or shadow councils. The other respondents were one member of the public, the Ministerial Advisory Group on Architecture and the Built Environment, Belfast City Centre Management Company and NILGA. The committee has been provided with a spreadsheet which summarised the comments received and the department's responses to them. The department's responses were communicated to the individual shadow councils during a series of recent meetings. It may be helpful if I quickly summarise the main issues raised during the consultation and the department's responses to them. In general, all the responders were content or welcomed the bill. On enforcement, Larne Borough Council, Mid and East Antrim District Council and North Down and Ard Shadow Council welcomed the possibility of the department continuing with off-street enforcement on their behalf until the expiry of its existing contracts with the private sector. North Down and Ard Council considered that the potential dual enforcement responsibilities of the department and councils may cause confusion and that the department should work with councils to publicise the delineation between the two. Belfast City Centre Management Company considered that one organisation should be responsible for enforcement including park and ride and park and share car parks. This, it felt, would ensure that a standardised and consistent approach to management, enforcement and administration would be applied across the board. The department would respond that the executive's vision was that the department should retain responsibility for park and share and park and ride car parks. It acknowledges that over time district councils may decide to adopt a different approach to enforcement activity. That flexibility is generally in keeping with the aim to create stronger and more responsible local government through the reform of public administration. If councils elect to continue to utilise the department's traffic attendants to carry out enforcement activities through service level agreements, there should be no confusion regarding roles. On staffing, Banbridge District Council and Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon District Council suggested that copies of contracts between the department and the private sector companies providing present-day enforcement activity should be made available to the new councils. We advise that the department cannot disclose information from such contracts which may contain personal information or be commercial in confidence. Councils will not in any event be party to the department's current contracts with its contractors. The department will provide each council requesting it with a draft service level agreement for the provision of enforcement services. This agreement will provide all necessary information on costs for enforcement and processing services. The enforcement contract may be extended beyond 2016, but the penalty charge notice IT processing contract must be renewed in 2016, and the department will liaise with councils regarding that renewal. On assets, a number of councils and shadow councils considered that copies of title documents, maps, rates assessment, condition reports, maintenance reports, public liability claims history, and details of insurance claims not settled, etc., easements, rights of way, and confirmation that the transferring assets are fit for purpose, etc., should be provided. Assurance was also sought that transferring assets will not be subject to any conditions or restrictions. Belfast City Council considered that the department should not retain any fee-paying off-street car parks for the council to operate under licence or lease. This comment relates to car parks that were earmarked for future road schemes. This, it felt, could reduce the number of car parking spaces available to the council by some 25%, and that the council should be recompensed accordingly. Antrim and Newton Abbey District Council requested clarification on what was meant by the statement that the transferring car parks would be cost neutral at the point of transfer for both the department and the councils. In response, I can advise that full detailed financial information by Council was provided on the 31st of July to the agreed RPA timetable. This financial information is subject to independent scrutiny by consultants engaged by local government. Final agreed figures are scheduled for the end of October. The remaining title and asset information requested is currently being collated and shared with councils, including data on claims history and asset condition. Asset information will be set out in the transfer scheme to be made by the Department under Section 122 of the Local Government Act Northern Ireland 2014. All transferring assets will be inspected prior to transfer to ensure that they are fit for purpose. The bill presently contains no conditions or restrictions regarding the disposal of transferring assets, as this would be at odds with one of the principal aims of the reform of public administration, which is to create stronger and more responsible local government. To include such a restrictive provision would remove a council's ability to freely progress any town centre regeneration proposal for the benefit of its citizens. The reference to the Department retaining off-street car parks relates to the proposal of the Department to retain some off-street car parks that will be required for future road schemes. This would be an inappropriate use of public funds to transfer those car parks free of charge to the new councils, only to have to repurchase them at public expense. The Department, however, proposes that the relevant council will benefit from the revenue from the car park until that scheme begins. On regulation, the Ministerial Advisory Group on Architecture and the Built Environment considered that district councils should undertake the responsibility for writing regulations that are suitable for the particular place, rather than being required to use regulations written in central government. Belfast City Council and NILGA requested that district councils be consulted when any new regulations are being drafted or revoked by the Department. In response to these comments, we explained that from a constitutional perspective, the councils will not be rule-making authorities under the Interpretation Act 1954, and consequently...
Sorry to interrupt you. I know we have a challenge in time in terms of the 30-day turnaround in this one here.
Yep.
I have to say, in terms of this actually makes me nervous slightly, because mostly in terms of where we have a consultation done, the rebuttals are obviously done at the right-hand side of the page, but I'm actually noticing some of these, and I don't think we're getting enough information in terms of actually in terms of detail. I mean, if you take, and I'm sorry to cut you off, I mean, you're probably nearly actually at the end of the stage, but I'm sort of concerned when reading through this, because if we take assets, the information requested will be obtained in schedules, will be included in the transfer scheme, be made to the Department under Section 122 of the Local Government Act. I think it would be useful to actually have some of those rebuttals actually now, rather than, because really what you're going to challenge us to try and turn this around in 30 days. A lot of us come from local government and would be supportive of the transfer function, but because there's concerns already from some of the councils and there isn't issues, it would be good to get those issues so as we can get our heads around those in case that we run into problems further down the track. So rather than maybe even finishing those, Terry, if we could have got us a full response to each of the points and let the members digest that, and we can take that as part of our normal workload, as opposed to actually going through these now, if that's appropriate.
We certainly could do that as a follow-up. We have provided the consultation responses as they have come in to the committee, and a summary of our responses.
That's right, but I mean, work is in hand to produce this information. That's not really giving us any assurance that the council is going to be content with that response, or indeed we would be content with the response that the council got. So we're there raising issues, and the response in terms of this document saying work is in hand to produce this information, but yet and all we're given a challenging timeline of 30 days to get this turned around. It's not maybe.
Well, I take your point. In terms of the asset transfer, that's under the Local Government 2014 Act. So this bill is not dealing with asset transfer as such.
It's not the point I'm making is, but if I go down through quite a few of those, the points that the councils are raising is not actually been addressed. And I think to assure ourselves that we need to be sure they're addressed. If we, and we're going to have a discussion after you leave in terms of whether we can progress this in the 30 days, and we'll go into closed session, members, maybe have that discussion. But for us to have that, and for us to assist you, you need to assist us and make sure we have all the information up front. And in terms of anything else that we need as we go forward, so is we need to get assurance from you now, Terry, also, that anything we ask for won't be this arbitrary 10 days turnaround. We need this stuff turned around virtually immediately to get us to continue in terms of. So I think there's a commitment from the members previously, but I have to say, reading some of this stuff here would have made me slightly nervous, and I think we should park that part of it now, unless there's anything else you want to say in terms of. I think we'll leave the consultation stuff if there's any other issues you want to raise, but I would like to see a report back fairly quickly to the members and full answers to all the points that have been raised in terms of the consultation process. If that's okay.
Chairman, we're happy to do that. I think we've provided a summary, thinking that was probably in the spreadsheet was more easier for members to navigate. We're happy to provide the details, certainly beyond all those comments. If I just would move to conclusion and wrap up these introductory comments. I would say in conclusion that the Department believes that none of the issues raised during the consultation required the bill to be amended, and at its meeting on the 25th of September, the Executive agreed and approved its introduction to the Assembly, which is scheduled for the 13th of October. The second stage debate is on the 21st of October, with the committee stage beginning on the 22nd of October. The bill is intended to come into operation on the 1st of April 2015, and as you say, Chairman, there's a very tight timescale to complete Assembly passage, and there's no need for me to reiterate the point you've made about the tight timescale and the fact that we've asked the committee to turn it around within the statutory 30 days. That concludes any of the points I want to make at this stage. I'm happy to take any questions.
Is there any of the rest of your folks want to say on it before we start now? No?
Just here to answer any questions.
All right, okay. Clause 122 of the Local Government Act, Northern Ireland 2014, basically states that the transfer can be completed by the 1st of April 15, where it appears to any Northern Ireland department necessary or expedient. Tell me why the department felt it was necessary or expedient to transfer it by 2015.
On or before the 1st of April 2015, as I understand it, there is also a commencement clause in the bill and in the 2014 legislation, which requires us to bring this into effect on the 1st of April.
Yeah, in terms of the commencement, but there's nothing in terms of that bill to suggest the end date. So why is it expedient to have it done for the 1st of April 2015? Why? So as opposed to the commencement, why is there a predetermined outcome at the end date?
Well, Mr. Chair, what we're doing is we're carrying out the Executive's wish. It's the Executive that wishes to, under RPA, that we have the car park transferred by the 1st of April.
Off the transfer. Okay. The other one, and it was supposed to come up in conversation, I think, 2 weeks ago, my first day here, actually, it was in terms of the asset itself. The report, in terms of PwC, had a report, and it said that, in the report it stated that off-street parking assets are valued at 233 million. While the transfer of the functions working group paper on March 2014 lists them at 64 million. So, can someone explain where the significant variance in those figures are?
Car parks are valued as part of the annual accounts process. They're independently valued, and as you'd be aware, in terms of over the last number of years, with falling property prices, that has been reflected in the annual valuations in annual accounts, and so this property has dropped in value with property generally. Yeah,
but I appreciate, in terms of the independent valuation, but when was the valuation for 233 million as opposed to the one at 64 million? Because the PwC report refers to assets at 233. And one of the members, fortnight ago, had raised concerns in terms of giving away the family silver here, I suppose. But whilst on the other hand, we all did advocate that we wanted to see this transfer function like so. But given the financial constraints we're under, some of us are maybe concerned now that where in a PwC report the value was 233 million, and in a report earlier this year it's now valued at 64 million.
That's the Deloitte report that we're talking about, the Deloitte due diligence report.
Yes.
Around PwC. As I say, those were the figures per the audited annual accounts. They're independently valued. We have no control on the value of the assets. So, in citing £233 million, that's a previous year's accounts, and 64 was the most recent accounts when they did their due diligence. So the reduction is purely as a result of falling property values. and it's been independently valued, not by us, not by the department, but by LPS and their independent valuation.
So it seems quite a large drop in 1 year, given that by 2014 we're supposed to be seeing our sales coming out and bounce back out again.
Well, I think that the figure you're quoting, the £65 million figure, that probably relates to the 11-12 accounts, and it may well have dropped further from there.
No.
Certainly our 12-13 accounts. It wouldn't be the 2014 figure.
Right, okay, we'll come back to that. Maybe I've opened up the floor to the members. Maybe if members could restrict it, maybe, sorry, Sean's first. Maybe
Yeah,
a couple of questions.
thanks, Chair. Back to the economic appraisal by PwC men. In transferring these assets, there must be a clear understanding that the car parks must be retained for car parking purposes unless otherwise agreed by DRD. What objections does the Department have to include such a statement within the proposed bill?
There are currently no restrictions in the bill, and the Department took the view that one of the principal aims of reform of public administration is to allow councils the ability to regenerate towns and cities across Northern Ireland, and that giving the Department the power to veto or delay development would run contrary to the spirit of the reform of public administration. It would effectively retain that decision as a veto within the Department.
So the local councils could use their facility for other activities or events?
It would be up to them to do that, yes.
Would that be up to them? Just one last question. The total budget to be transferred is based on 2012-13 financial details, 2 years before the proposed transfer of these assets. Given the criticality of the budget to the transfer being rated neutral, has revision of these figures been carried out?
Yes, and they were revised as of the 31st of July this year and issued to councils, and we're currently in liaison with councils to go over those figures. Deloitte are doing a second due diligence report on those figures, and they will be finalised by the end of October.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Maybe just add to that, Mr. Chair, what process we're going through now as far as they pull together a transfer scheme for each of the individual councils. We're pulling together spreadsheets which details all the car parks transferring, all the title relating to those car parks, all the financial information relating to those car parks. We're also pulling together boundary maps, so as each council will know exactly the boundary of each car park they're taking responsibility for. All that information, it's a big exercise when we're still in the midst of processing that. We have got the spreadsheets which we can share with the council or with the committee at this stage. And the additional information is all fairly bulky, but we're having meetings with all the individual councils, and they're fairly satisfied that the information we're gathering is what they'll need to allow them to take the responsibility on.
Just on that, but given that, I mean, going back to this 30 days that we're starting the process, in terms of valuation then, what effect will that have in terms of, say, the valuation is even less, in terms of asset?
Well, the valuation will be what the valuation is, Mr. Chair. So, the valuation, I think it's 2015-16, the estimate, most recent estimate of valuations is going on together with the estimated incomes. So we have all that information, and we're working our way through all that.
But it's an independent valuation, and this bill will transfer powers to councils. The assets transfer will happen under the 2014 Act, and the assets will be at their most recent valuation as independent arm's-length valuation. So, and they have come down considerably since 2012-13, as you quite rightly say. However, assets, as they say in the advertisements, they may go up or down, subject to the financial climate.
Cathal?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. Chair, I suppose like maybe many, if not everybody around these tables, had a background in local government. We did, we were very supportive of this going back into local government, but it's not without its responsibility. There are obviously, in terms of assets, not subject to any restrictions, but in terms of responsibilities, we do have then the responsibility for claims still remaining with council post 1st of April. I'm just wondering How do you see that being accepted within local government? It's going to be a worry, and particularly when we're trying to put this forward as a rates neutral move.
Chair, that's one of the pieces of information that the shadow councils have asked us to provide, is the potential for claims. So they're trying to sort of do some sort of estimate what's the potential liability. Presently, there's 6 ongoing claims across all our 330 odd car parks there to transfer, and there's 6 of those claims that are ongoing, which we haven't got quantum for, and there's 2 that have been rejected, which so potentially they can be pursued by the applicants. But I think that reflects, when we spoke to Belfast City Council, they were surprised because there's only 1 claim ongoing on all the car parks that transferred to Belfast Council. They were quite surprised by that because they're inundated with claims in all their car parks and all their leisure centres. So I think it's reflective of I suppose, the maintenance regime we have in place, that our public liability claims in car parks is so low.
Yeah, Chair, that's surprising. There's only 6 alive. How many have been there down through the period?
But when we check with our public liabilities claims, I think over the last 3 years there's been 30 odd claims. The vast majority of those are rejected. But at present, at this minute, there's 6 live cases across the whole of the province.
We've also agreed with councils that liability would remain with the department up until the point of transfer, so up until the 31st of March 2015. From then on, it would be council's responsibility. So any claims up until that date or concerning prior to that date,
I get that. I get
council's
that.
responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
See, on that point you just made, Terry, but so that's up to 2015, but I mean, David's talking about claims that's already ongoing. Do you lift the tab for those?
We will continue those, yes.
Okay. John?
Thanks, Chairperson. The winter maintenance of these car parks would transfer to the local councils, is that right?
Well, the car parks are up to the council to decide what winter maintenance regime they want to put in place for the car parks.
Well, I'm just looking at this from the people who use the car park, from their point of view. We do know about this conflict that's continuous between the councils and yourselves in relation to footpaths. Will this be an extension of this bizarre situation where people don't take responsibility? And given that you've spent the millions on the salters and all the rest of it, is this adding even more cost to the new councils who will have to then equip themselves to salt the car parks?
But I suppose that's a decision for the council. First of all, they have to decide if that's what they want to do. Presently, I'm not a winter maintenance expert, so my understanding is we don't grit our car parks at present.
No, but
But council would have to decide.
I know enough older people who use them out of necessity and get broken legs and lie for weeks then trying to get repaired.
I also know, sorry, just on the agreements with council, I know that the vast majority of councils, I think it was of the old 26 councils, I think there was something like 22 or 23 councils had signed up to an agreement with DRD to salt footpaths. And I think we'd be very hopeful with the new 11 councils that all councils would now sign up to that agreement.
I'm just saying, before we even start, we don't want to start another long period of trying to get some kind of understanding between local councils and yourselves as to who does what. But the enforcement costs at the minute, some people in the public, Chairperson, think this is a cash cow. It's not. It costs twice as much to pay the red coats. This is actually collected. Isn't that right? Well, it does. I can tell you it does.
It doesn't, at the minute, car parking would be a contributor to council, so there's a surplus from off-street car parking in terms of the revenue versus the costs.
Well, let's say some progressive local council decides all our car parks are going to be free. Who picks up the disproportionate cost then of the red coats, assuming, well, they're here to 2016 anyway?
That's a matter for the council. That's the whole point. The councils will have responsibility for car parks, car park provision, car park enforcement. So that's the power of the council to decide what sort of tariffs it wants to put in place in the particular towns that it covers. But it'll also have to be mindful of the running costs of those car parks.
So if a council's opt out of car parking charges, they're still liable for the red coats, aye?
No.
Will
No,
that be based-
but we've quantified with councils exactly how much car parking in their area will contribute, how much of the surplus there is for each individual council. The way the transfer of monies to councils is organised by DFP, that will mean that it should be cost neutral at the starting point. So there should be no cost to councils for car parks going forward.
You finished, John, yeah?
Keep me right if I'm straying a bit.
Well, just one more then, and then we'll get some
Aye.
lessons.
Will this order or act provide for local councils in the future to take a greater interest in many car parks that are not under your control? They're in the Asda's, Tesco's and so on, where provision for people with disability is sadly abused and not enforced, or indeed in some cases, tickets produced by some English-based company planting outrageous fines. Is that all provided for in this?
No, this bill is a simple one-clause bill to transfer the off-street car parks and the department's responsibility to the council.
All right, Chair.
Okay, Ross?
Couple of questions. The transfer of off-street parking and the properties themselves, what are the legal fees going to be for that? Have you any idea what the cost is going to be?
In fact, for transferring the actual title
Yeah.
to the car, there is no cost. The transfer scheme itself transfers the title to the councils. So whatever title we have, we inherited these car parks, most of the title of the car parks from the old county councils.
Yes.
So if we were disposing of a car park now, basically what our solicitors would do, if we've got registered title, we recite the registered title and the history to that. Or if it's unregistered title, where it's a title that historically comes from the council, that's recited. And that's exactly the same as what the council will do. So there's no legal transfer, as it were, but the transfer scheme transfers the title.
The legal ownership goes into the
Yes.
council.
There's no cost involved to the council.
And this relates solely to off-street parking. So therefore DRD are retaining on-street parking.
Yes.
This would be like in Belfast where they have the meters in the city centre. And any other provincial town, that will still be the same. On-street parking will still be the responsibility of DRD,
Yeah.
where there is no meters. So therefore, you will still be employing red coats to enforce that.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
I apologise, Dan, I should have called you before that. That's right, Chair. Go ahead.
Better to come on first.
People think we're brothers sometimes.
My younger brother will speak to you now.
Thank you, Chair. I note there that your correspondence says that it'll be cost neutral in terms of the transfer, but seeing situations where the council will be inheriting a car park that is in urgent need of upgrade or maintenance or drainage or whatever, has that been factored into any budgetary considerations for councils?
Well, there's no, I can tell you there's no car park in urgent need.
Right.
Because that's part of our maintenance regime. We have to properly maintain and carry out the surveys, attend to any defects.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. And that all the car parking machines, the machines will be collecting revenue, traffic attendants and lights and signs were in place to support that right up to the date of the transfer. So nothing changes there. But as far as funding, there's funding that will go forward for future maintenance.
Yes, on parking, paying display machines and on street lighting equipment, but not for the car parks themselves. They're fit for purpose at the point of transfer. So, as Dave said, they're in good order. The lines and signs are done, and we won't be providing any fund for increasing the condition.
But the revenue from the car parks will fund future maintenance. The council gets that.
Yeah, secondly, I note that the regulations relating to car parks will restate DRD, and presumably that will have an impact on the council's management and running off the car parks. I note certainly from Milgans and Belfast City Council's responses that they're keen that councils will have an influence on those regulations. Would you be minded?
At the point of transfer, the off-street parking order, that's the one which details all the car parks and all the tariffs. So it's in place. If a council wants to change a tariff, in any particular car park or make it free or whatever the council wants to do, then it would do that by administrative order. But it would do it. It's, you know, the council will take its own action through administrative order. It can't amend a statute, but it's the same. The outcome's the same, but that allows the council, each individual council, the power to do their own thing, whichever they think is best for their citizens.
And if we were to make any, we retain the rule-making authority, and if we were to make any changes, we would consult, there's no question, we would consult with councils in depth as to before we would make any regulations or changes.
Well, I think that's the point. There's about 6 or 7 points there which, in the regulations, which appear to be staying with TRDs, obviously. So it would be a case of you would consult council.
We would need, yes.
It's part of the normal process. We would do that.
You see, in terms of, I mean, so the genesis of this was actually councils wanted to do this part, but I don't know if the question's ever been asked, and I'm just curious now as we're interrogating this slightly. How much does road service actually make from the car parks at the moment? So really, potentially, what have councils, I mean, is this going to be an income generator for councils? I mean, that wasn't the purpose for them. They were going to use it to try and get people into town centres, but profit-wise, how much is DRD making at the moment?
In the figures that we provided 31st of July, it was overall car parks, it was a surplus of some £7 million.
In terms of off-street car parks?
Yes, now, the way yes, off-street car parks, that's the amount transferring to councils, effectively revenue generating. However, the way the budget transfer works at the centre, operated by DFP, they will effectively take that into account and offset it against the budget transferring for all other functions. So effectively, the function will come to councils at nil cost. So it's not a windfall to councils in terms of the revenue.
No, what, sorry?
It's not a windfall to councils in terms of the revenue.
Okay.
That revenue will already been counted against the budget for other functions transferring, so it would be required.
So really, it's not a windfall for them, so but it's going to be a cost then for the purpose that they want them for. Because they're going to, I mean, taking the point that the question Dave was asked previously and they answered, where some councils want to reduce the cost of parking to try and encourage people to use those, it's actually going to come at a cost.
There would be a cost associated with that. So, as it would be if DRD wanted to reduce car parking charges at the moment, there would be a cost, and we've quantified exactly what the benefit for each council is, so they're aware exactly what that cost would be should they wish to reduce or increase. They could increase car parking charges or.
In terms of your 7 million that you're talking about, is that factoring in the scheme that's out there at the moment in terms of the? Is it £1 for 3 hours or something? Is it
£1 for 5 hours?
So
Yes.
so prior to that, so that was only just late last year.
It was introduced at Christmas last year and has been running as a pilot for 6 months this year.
Prior to that, how much was the car parks making a year?
It was a lesser figure than that, and at one stage, a number of years ago, car parks weren't making money, and there was no surplus.
So you're saying, Terry, by reducing the cost, you've actually made more money?
Well, as you do, and we've reduced the cost of enforcement and cost of operating car parks significantly over the last 3 or 4 years. Yes.
And I know I'm going off, Mum. Why was that not thought of before to try and? I mean, so the purpose of the reduction was to try and obviously to get people to use town centres. But if it was costing you money prior to actually higher charges, why was there never an idea to reduce the cost before?
Previously, we would have been looking to increase costs to break even.
Yes. Whereas now you reduced the cost to make a profit.
Now, there are a number of reasons why the cost it now shows a profit, a surplus rather than a deficit, and those are we renegotiated the contract for enforcement, and we were able to reduce costs by some £3 million per year.
Okay.
Also, as part of the way central government has to state its revenues and incomes, it has to incorporate the capital costs, and so when you bring in the capital costs of car parks, then that negates that an amount of the revenue. So that would turn it into a loss situation. You don't have to do that in terms of the transfer to councils, so and there'll be no capital costs associated with the car parks going to councils. So it's a simple direct costs.
So in terms of reducing the cost, a layperson could be forgiven for thinking that you stumbled across the profit by accident. And on that, I'll maybe call David McNary.
Thank you. I do apologise for being late, but I'm very pleased to be here.
Seems to be a high number of issues. We're talking about a done deal, reading about what you've had to say and listening to what you've said in the past. We're talking about a done deal, and there seems still to be a high number of issues that the councils are seeking clarification on. At what point do you believe that you'll be able to report to this committee that the transfer is complete with overall consent and unanimous consent from each and every council?
There are a couple of points there. In terms of a done deal, it's the executive has already made the decision, so we're simply implementing the executive decision. In terms of when the transfer will be complete, well, one indicator of that is how many councils wish to piggyback on the current DRD arrangements, and the majority of councils are now in that position. They've indicated that they do wish to continue with our enforcement arrangements. So,
without any clarification?
well, we have provided considerable clarification, on the financial impact by council, disaggregated in terms of exactly what it would cost councils from April 15 onward, and we've also provided extensive information with councils on the assets themselves, details of the number of car parks, and we have also gone round all of the councils and met with the shadow councils or chief executives, in some cases, and chief executives, to discuss it with them.
I understand that. What I'm trying to really get you to say, if you can say, if you can't say it, you're not ready to say it, well then that's fine. Are you able right now to tell me that all the councils have bought into this, that there is an agreement from every council in Northern Ireland, the Transitional Council, to buy into this, as we sit?
Well, all the respondents to the bill welcomed the bill.
No, that's not what I asked you.
And there certainly were some issues in the consultation. We don't believe that the issues raised in the consultation, either we have clarified these with
councils. Are we in a
councils.
position right now that you can tell this committee that every council in Northern Ireland Transition Council has bought into this? That's all I need to hear.
When you say
no?
bought into what exactly?
Bought into accepting the transfer.
Well, in terms of our legislation, which is what we're here to discuss, it's a one-clause bill. We've issued for consultation, and all we can gauge is a couple of things that I've indicated. A, the responses of the consultation, and B, what councils have suggested to us in terms of do they want to participate in our current arrangements, and they have said, and the majority have said yes, and we're talking to the remaining councils. We expect them to do the same.
Maybe just, I suppose, the end point of this, it says the transfer scheme itself is a legal document, and we'll be drafting that and sharing that with the councils, each individual council. But until the point that council signs that transfer scheme,
At this moment of time, I can't. I'm picking up, and I don't want to name councils in particular because of a whole long list. Take, for instance, Craigavon Council. It has a long, long way to go before, I understand, before it signs off on this. So the question is, I know that there are a lot more than that. And the question is, you can't say to the council that you have the agreement. I'm trying to find out, when do you think you might have that agreement? Just what are the obstacles? Are they unsurmountable, or are they surmountable?
as far as our consultation with the councils are, all the councils have come back in a very positive way. There is practical things because we have to produce a legal document for them to sign. But we're gathering all the information up. We've provided them with lots of information to allow them to make their plans, and they are all making plans to take the car parks over based on the preliminary information that we've given them. But that has to be all pulled together.
It's work in progress then, Chairman, and maybe one day we'll find out. I'm not too sure that this bright idea, once it starts to unravel, will seem just so bright. But if I may just ask one other question, Chairman. Are there any conditions that you can tell me, because I can't see them, any conditions once ownership, and that's what we're talking about, transfers, which could prohibit a council disposing of the asset that they've been handed and not retaining it as a car park?
There are no conditions or barriers in
You
the
don't think
in the
that
bill.
is an absolute scandal? That, you know, first of all, taking the point of view as a ratepayer, right? But you're handing over assets without any conditions, nothing to protect the car parking that's there, the valuable car parking that retailers and shop owners and indeed consumers use on a daily basis. But you can have an asset sitting there one day for a council to decide, well, here, we're in a bit of trouble here, let's flog something. What didn't cost us anything? Car parks didn't cost us anything. So let's flog it and let's use the money for something else. And there's not one condition in this bill, not one condition in this bill prohibiting that. Not even on a term to say you can't do it for 5 years.
The aim of RPA, as we see it, is to encourage, or one of the main pillars is to encourage the council's ability to produce regeneration proposals in towns and cities. And we take the view that restriction of the council's ability to use car parks
So you
in the
wouldn't
best
mind if they
interest
flogged it?
in the best interest
You
of
don't
their
want to
citizens.
restrict them. You wouldn't mind if they get it tomorrow and they can flog it on Friday.
And also don't have any view in terms of that I would be suspicious of council's motives in any way, and in terms of the councillors.
Can I suggest maybe, how would the department feel if the committee were to recommend an amendment in terms of that, to actually put in a clause that they couldn't dispose of it?
We'd be happy to consider any amendment.
I think that might be a way to take that forward, maybe just do it rather than pursuing it now. I mean, the committee can discuss that in terms of making an amendment by way of suggesting that. Have you any other questions, Dale?
No, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's... No, sorry, Joe, I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, Chairman, can I just ask, in relation to the capital cost of car parks over the last 10 years, what would have been the sort of total quantum that would have been spent in car parks?
In terms of
Of the capital expenditure that would have been...
capital, something around £100,000 per year.
I'll just remind members, maybe anybody else
Off-street car
want
parks.
to just double check in there.
100,000 in total for all of the car parks?
In terms of
On
capital resurfacing.
Okay.
Chris?
Thanks, Chair. It may have been covered. If it has, you can move me on quickly. But some of the concerns that seem to be being raised are in relation to the enforcement regime that's coming in and the existence of contracts until October 2016. Has that been covered, or could you speak about how exactly that will operate, given that there are private contracts in place until October 2016 with regards enforcement?
Yeah, well, the option that's been presented to council is that they will have a service level agreement with the department to facilitate enforcement through the current contract with NSL. And, what we have provided in that draft service level agreement at the minute is detail of costs for deployed hours and all the activities that are involved therein. We've worked, drawn that up with Belfast City Council. It has a number of stages still to go through, obviously through legal stages, and we hope to have that finalised in draft form by the end of October.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe, members, I suggest maybe we should go into closed session. And if you and your team want to hang about outside, we'll maybe give you a shout back. We're going to briefly discuss in terms of how we think we can do 30 days or otherwise. So if you, well, maybe just going to get into committee here for a few minutes. Okay.
What about the suggestion you had about the amendment on that? Does that come later? Suggestion about conditions?
Members, when it comes to committee stage, what members have an opportunity to amend the bill.
Okay.
I think there's a clear marker out there now that we will be doing that deal. Certainly, I'm.
Okay, yes.
And even I would support that.
Oh, here we're going dry.
Right, members.
Consensus?
Before we move to committee of
Right.
Okay, members, just for the record, whilst we were in closed session, the members did have a discussion in terms of the car parks, and we have by majority agreed in terms of actually starting the consultation process earlier, and that we do reserve the right under Article 30, under Standing Order 33.4, where we could actually apply for an extension. So the indication is that we are actually working towards to try and support the department, but we're not clearly supporting the 30 days, but what we are doing is actually going to try and start the consultation process early, and we would hope that the department will work with us in terms of that so as we can actually work to a very tight deadline. But we do reserve the right to Standing Order 33.4. Okay, members? Yeah. So, agenda item number 6, departmental briefing on strategic drainage infrastructure and infraction risk. Can I refer members to page 82 in their packs? And the research paper at page 60 of the table packs. So we were in closed session. Can just remind members again in terms of electronic devices. Can I welcome Robert, Mark and Louise? And can I say, maybe we're running tight now. Robert, is it you that's leading off?
It is indeed, Chairman, and I'll be as quick as I can. Hopefully there'll be time for some questions at the end of it. We're here to briefing the Strategic Drainage Infrastructure Initiative, and that is an interdepartmental initiative proposed by our Minister, the Minister for Regional Development. It was approved by the Executive in July, so we have Executive approval to move forward with it, and the Committee has received a paper which explains the initiative. I'll not repeat everything that's in the paper in view of the time. I'll try and give a quick overview. The key objective is to prepare a comprehensive plan for future strategic drainage infrastructure, and this will be taken forward by an interdepartmental programme board, and that board is in the process of being set up. On the board will be representatives of 4 departments: DRD, responsible for water and roads; DFP, COE, responsible for environment; and agriculture, responsible for rivers. We'll also have Northern Ireland Water, SIB, and Belfast City Council on that board. I'd like to recap the key drivers and why this is necessary, Chairman. On the 17th of September, Northern Ireland Water gave the Committee a briefing on infrastructure and explained why it was becoming inadequate in response to certain threats. And effectively those threats are inadequate drainage infrastructure to support future economic growth, where further investment is necessary. And one of the points that NI Water made in that briefing was that on average its level of investment in wastewater infrastructure, sewers, would allow a sewer to be replaced every 1,200 years, and clearly the lifespan of the sewers would considerably less than that. So that was an example of the investment level. We also have a difficulty in relation to environmental protection, particular water quality in Belfast Lough, where it appears likely that we're not going to meet the standard required of us by the Water Framework Directive, and we're required in the inner harbour, the absolute harbour area, the central harbour, to reach a standard of moderate in 2015, and that the standard currently is bad, and it doesn't look likely that we'll be able to recover that in the next year. Just to say a little bit on the growth aspect of that, NI Water in the 17th of September meeting had provided examples of wastewater treatment plants that need upgraded, and there are 100 in its list at present. During the next 6 years, they will be only able to deal with 19 of those, and of that 100, 71 are areas where they're currently constrained in relation to growth. In other words, the capacity of the wastewater treatment works, which makes it an issue for NI Water whether to connect further properties or further businesses into it. And only 13 of those 71 will be upgraded or replaced during the next 6 years. So over the next 6 years, NI Water's investment is going to be effectively falling behind the needs for future investment in environmental protection. I won't give you much detail on the flooding, Chairman, because I think everybody is very familiar with the problems we've had in recent years. And simply to say that in relation to the overall cost that we anticipate being attached to the investment plan that we might be producing, the current estimate is that it will cost an additional £750 million. I'd like very quickly, Chair, to say how these problems arise, if you don't mind, just to say that water falling here at Stormont, for example, and what happens to it, and how this creates the problems that we're trying to address. If you've got a light drizzle or no rain at all, basically the system operates normally. Water would fall on the roof, go into the private sewers in the Stormont estate, through a 300-metre culvert and into the Knock River, from
You
where,
left the part out.
or into the combined sewer, sorry?
You left the part out.
It's coming in.
It comes in the offices on the third floor first.
And then eventually it flows through the building, taking a little tourist detour on the way. And it goes into the combined sewer effectively and then runs into the Kinniger treatment works. That's where it ends up. That's the normal situation, the way it's meant to happen. If you get heavy rain like Sunday night, Monday morning, what happens is that along that journey, at various points in the sewer network, and there are about 20 points between here and Kinniger, the water may overflow. It may spill out of the combined sewer network, and it then goes into the Knock River and into the Cons water, with the result that you damage the environment and damage ultimately to Belfast Lough water quality. And that happens far too often throughout the overall network around the Greater Belfast area. The worst example I would maybe talk about is Belfast wastewater treatment plants. That's in a normal wet day. You're finding that spilling out into a watercourse and then finding its way into the loch. Now, the problem with that is the fact that effectively that it's not treated. So you're getting effectively dilute sewage flowing in that direction. In a severe storm situation, of course, what happens is that the water can't actually flow quickly enough into the watercourse, which could flood, of course, on itself. So what happens is pressure then in the combined sewer network forces up manholes, and you get effectively dilated sewage running into people's homes, into businesses, and that's where the serious difficulty arises with flooding. So the flooding difficulty then that's caused there is unpleasant flooding. It's not just stormwater, it is actually diluted sewage. In relation to the solution to all of this, Chair, very quickly, if you're looking at a comprehensive plan for the Greater Belfast area, we've been looking for a variety of solutions. There's the traditional solution approach, which would be, for example, increasing capacity in wastewater treatment works, bigger sewers, and so on, and perhaps including storage. Now, the Assistant Clerk is passing out some photographs here. Last week, we visited Llanelli, which has a very similar problem to Belfast in terms of water quality in the marine environment. And it doesn't have rivers or watercourses in the area to help with this. So what they've been looking at is a sustainable drainage solution. Now, as I said, the comprehensive plan that we're trying to develop for the Greater Belfast area would have a lot of traditional solution elements in it, but one of the things we want particularly to consider is a more sustainable drainage solution. Not maybe go through the pictures and details, but the point I'm trying to make of this, if you look at the perhaps the second photograph, set of photographs there. This is in a little primary school project where the Water Authority in Llanelli entered into an agreement with the primary school, paid for the resurfacing of a lot of the primary school courtyard areas. And you see the brown surface there, that's permeable. Water drains through it. And what happens to the water then is it drains into the top right box, top right picture, and shows that plastic crate-looking thing. Effectively, that's a geocellular solution to sustainable drainage. And that box underneath that surface, there are layers of those boxes underneath the whole of the surface area that you're seeing there. And that's filled effectively lightly with soil, so that slows down the water draining down through the ground. Now that means that water is held in the ground a bit like a sponge, and it trickles away, and there's a flow regulation on it, so it trickles away into the combined sewer. So instead of pouring onto the hard surface that existed there before, running into the combined sewer, and then perhaps flooding downhill, the water is held and it is released much more slowly into the system. And that effectively is the key thing about most sustainable drainage solutions. It's to slow down the water and actually get rid of some of the water, because if you notice the planting there, and indeed in some of the other slides, you'll see that they're planted areas with trees and shrubbery and so on. And water draining into an area that has trees and shrubbery above it. Of course, the trees soak it up, and through evaporation of the tree leaves, and also through the use of the water to grow the tree and so on, then Llanelli have been finding that a very significant volume of water is actually removed from their system. If you look finally at the last slide, Chairman, the second last slide, I just want to make the point that if you look there in the right-hand slide, that's what we would call a back entry situation, and that is simply a gully that takes the water down that back entry and then takes it into, I think there's a slide there that shows drainage under a roadway. It may be the one before that, just to pick it up. Yes, in the left-hand side of slide 4. you'll see that again, the same kind of situation that we've got there before. That roadway all has geocellular cells underneath it. In this case, because there's traffic over it, the water will go in through the normal road gullies, but instead of going into the sewer network, it goes into the geocellular cells and is then slowed, released back into the combined sewerage system much more slowly. Now, Llanelli tell us that they have managed to, for example, in relation to the Queen Mary's Walk area, which is the slide you're just looking at, they've removed, in 4 months that they've been monitoring this, they have 4,600 cubic metres of water that has not gone into the sewer system. That's just been removed through the trees and plants. It's been held to allow the foliage to use it, and that's water that never went into the system. In addition, in a 1 in 5 year storm, they estimate that they would be removing 125 litres per second from that area. So that's 125 litres per second, slowed down, that is not rushing its way down into the sewer network with potentially flooding, potentially overspilling. And again, in the primary school project, 1,200 cubic metres removed in 4 months and 53 litres per second slowed down. I've gone through that extremely quickly, Chairman, and I just want to emphasise at the end that we're at the start, we hope, of a planning project to put this in place. And I've used Stormont as an example. There are other opportunities here as well. For example, if you've got playing fields, you can put sustainable drainage in underneath them. And the best way of doing all of this is when you're actually changing, say playing fields, roads or whatever, whenever you're doing infrastructure projects, because that keeps the cost down. I should say sustainable drainage estimated at maybe 75% the cost of traditional drainage and at no greater operating cost. And that's going to be a big part of the project that we want to take forward. I should stop there and perhaps give you some time.
Give us an opportunity to get a few questions.
I should also say, Chairman, NI Water, our request, have produced a summary of what I've just run through very fast. It's 4 journeys of a Belfast raindrop, from the Stormont area. So we'd be happy to forward that to you if you'd find that.
Can I say, Robert, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your cooperation in terms of speed. However, I am slightly frustrated in that we're being presented as this as if it's a new concept. Sustainable drainage has been out there for a long time.
That's right.
And in terms of your department, amongst other departments, haven't been working collaboratively to actually enforce the situation where sustainable drainage is used. So, as opposed to, so it's certainly not a new concept. There's actually firms within Northern Ireland who actually are involved in this industry, but unfortunately, the departments don't bang their heads together in terms of actually making this a requirement in terms of new developments, where we actually could mitigate against problems for the future. But now we're actually coming late in the day and trying to come in behind to fix some of this stuff. So this type of stuff actually frustrates me, because this should have been coming as part of the development plan as opposed to actually coming to fix the problems. And actually many of us around this table, in terms of development proposals in their own areas, have made suggestions, but planners in their wisdom seem to know more than everyone else, and they put the pressure on the systems. That's just a wee pet hate of mine, I have to say. But in terms of your presentation, in terms of the paperwork you've provided to us, you state that infraction proceedings by the Commission might be avoided if there's evidence of a credible plan to resolve the problem, and the European Commission can be satisfied that appropriate action would be taken. Would this require a firm indication of a budget in order to be deemed credible? And I suppose the other part of that, going back to my first point, how would it be seen credible given that some of this technology has already been there, but NI PLC has refused to use it?
Well, I'll deal with the question in relation to the infraction proceedings first. Our experience, NI Water's experience, has been that where a plan is in place and the European Commission can see that action is being taken or is planned to be taken, then the fines that come with infraction proceedings are not levied. And there's an example of that in our own experience up in the North Coast area, where there's a wastewater treatment works that is being put in place to deal with an infraction issue. And Llanelli have just been put into infraction proceedings, notwithstanding the work that they've already done and the plans that they have. But they are hoping to avoid the fines because of the fact that they've got ahead and started doing the work. I might make the point that the Commission will judge based on what's practical and feasible. So if we have a plan, then they'll be expecting implementation very quickly. The comprehensive plan I spoke about would probably take about maybe 10 years to implement in full, but you could make some modest progress quite early on, which would, we think, be sufficient to show the Commission that we're we're serious about it, and the fact that we're addressing it comprehensively is something that we think has resonance with the Commission. There's no certainty with that, but that's our hope. I say about budget, the £750 million I mentioned is not needed in one lump sum of money right away.
That's good.
It's particularly good. But what we need is the plan that says how we would spend that additional funding over, say, 10 years. And many of the projects that could be taken forward in advance would be relatively inexpensive. The other point I would make about your pet here about why are we not doing it already and why is the technology not being used. Glenethy is the first example I've been aware of where the kind of SUDS retrofitting to roads has been done. I'm not aware of any others. I mean, the engineering colleagues may well know some, but that's an example of how you can spend £2.1 million on putting SUDS underneath the roadways, actually underneath the roads. And the picture chosen there shows long street type areas, terraced areas. We've got plenty of those where we do it. So I think there are reasons where people have been cautious about it. There are also issues that we would need to settle in terms of long-term maintenance, which I think has been one of the issues that has caused authorities not to do it. The other thing I might say is that actually Wales, as being a mutual water authority, wants to keep costs down. Private water utilities in England and Wales wouldn't bother because they can spend the money and charge people for it.
Yeah, you're sort of straying off site now
Sorry.
here, Robert. But taking the point in terms of the Commission, the European Commission, in terms of infraction, you're actually talking about Glenethy, who are actually further advanced than us, and they're getting an infraction. We're much actually further behind them.
We are.
So what's the possibility of us actually getting any leeway in terms of that? And if you could stick straight to that question as opposed to...
First of all, the European Commission doesn't actually know yet in formal terms the latest situation in relation to Belfast Lock, because that report is due really next year, and there's a whole series of meetings next year over that particular issue. So really we're talking about, though we've got the results now and don't expect them to be better, we're talking about towards the end of next year, perhaps by the time the Commission would have to consider whether or not to begin infraction proceedings. So that's, first of all, we're actually have a bit more time than Glenethy, who have actually been facing this a couple of years ago, and they're now taking the action. Infraction proceedings have only just begun, but fines will only follow if the Commission is unhappy at their response to infraction proceedings. Yeah. So we would have probably several years to actually put action in place to do
obviously
this.
the other part of that is in terms of, and you did indicate 750 million, you're not wanting 750 million up front. However, how credible will the European Commission see that unless there's a firm commitment in terms of money being set aside for that? Or are you going to tell us today that there has been money set aside for it?
No, money hasn't been set aside for it, and I think I need to make a couple of distinctions here. First of all, in the 6 years coming in the PC15 period, 2015 to 2021, NI Water hasn't got money in its budget that will allow us to avoid the difficulty with Belfast Lock or to fix the problem. A big part of that, for example, will include some serious traditional investment, and about £90 million would be needed to upgrade the Belfast wastewater treatment plant issues. Now, that's not in the next 6 years' budget, and it couldn't be because of the level of the other things that NI Water has to do. So that's a big block of money on its own. But what we can do, and some things will be done, a little bit will be done in terms of sustainable drainage, in particular looking at demonstrations and pilot projects, because we need to get developers to see how this works as well and to work with us. We had hoped, for example, Stormont would be a demonstration project, but we haven't managed to convince the Finance Minister of that just yet. So we're looking for an area to start that. In relation to the investment, we need a plan to make sure we use it properly. And just to say, the more we can do that takes water out of the system so that it never goes into the sewer in the first place.
I think many of us understand that.
Yeah.
But in terms of response, I'm going to call John next, but before I call John, the point I'm making, and you're talking about in terms of developers wouldn't actually have a choice in using the system if it was a mandatory requirement in terms of planning. So I think those conversations should be expanded between yourselves and DOE to actually make it a mandatory requirement. I mean, developers are not going to put in a more expensive system when they're not required to do it. Whereas if it was mandatory in terms of your DOE colleagues, and we're suggesting this is not a request, this is a requirement in terms of your application, then we wouldn't be taking it.
We say, Chairman, we have an opportunity to discuss this on the 22nd when we're up in front of yourselves again in relation to the water bill, because we plan to put in legislation that would make it a requirement that we could impose just such a requirement, or at least a requirement that SUDs would be considered, because it wouldn't be feasible in every situation.
Well, NI waters are standard consultees in all planning applications, so
Not yet, until they're not a statutory consultee until RPA goes through.
well, they're,
Yeah. That's one of the problems, and then the RPA legislation will fix it and make them statutory.
well, in terms of you're making a suggestion rather than a requirement, John.
Chairperson, I'm at this stage totally confused. As you know, we had Northern Ireland Water last week. No fears of infraction at all. You turn up this week, you talk about infraction, and all of us are conscious that we'll leave a legacy to a future generation. I don't want to go down in history as somebody who sat as a nodding dog around the table, listening to this stuff, and then some future generation discovers that they're paying off the neglect that we caused for millions of pounds. Is there any more scientific way of establishing what the risks of infraction are?
In relation to the risk of infraction, all we can point to is, for example, the extent to which the water quality in Belfast Lough has fallen in recent years. And it's divided into three sections. There's the outer harbour, inner harbour, and then the actual harbour area. It's the actual harbour area, right where the outfalls are, that are the problem. And they used to be moderate, but they've now fallen to bad. And really, we can't see how that can improve in the 1 year we have to convince the European Union that it shouldn't bring infraction proceedings. That's probably the best way I can put it. Because we know, for example, the Belfast Wastewater Treatment Works spilled 1 million cubic metres. That's the overflow spilling last year, when in fact the original design capacity was 200,000 cubic metres. So we know that we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing, or we prefer not to be doing, and there is no improvement that we can foresee that will avoid infraction proceedings. Infraction proceedings effectively are automatic if the Commission finds that you didn't meet the compliance standard.
So they're going to
Chairperson, that's very useful, but I think the committee as a whole needs to be listening very carefully to what Robert is saying, and maybe at some future time have a serious discussion on the risks of infraction. Because and I know last week we were told Northern Ireland Water put back plans for 6 years. We were told, oh well, it'll not make a wild difference. But I'm sure somebody in the Commission looks at that overall and says, these people are not seriously investing in clearing up the mess that a previous generation has created.
David?
Chairman, just a couple of questions. Following up on this Llanelli situation, if what their efforts, and they seem to be pretty positive, aren't acceptable to the EU, will our escape route against infraction be superior to Llanelli? In other words, what standards are you trying to meet to get up there?
And the standards are effectively water quality standards, and the Commission will understand that it will take quite some years, even if we had remedial measures in place now, before we improve that situation. And I could say Northern Ireland Water on the whole is very good in that, because all around the coastline we've got excellent compliance standards. It's just this one area is the problem. So
we know now that Llanelli's standards haven't been good enough, so I take it that what we're going to say is, well, that's not good enough, we have to go up here.
What Llanelli is doing today may well be good enough if they do enough of it. What they were doing a couple of years ago, which caused the problem in the harbour that they have there, wasn't good enough. And they had exactly the same problem we have, where they were spilling far too often and effectively dilute sewage going into their harbour area, where they have shellfish beds just as we have, and where they have the same kind of problems we have. Yeah.
Just on the question of SUDs, there are some developers already putting in that SUD system. They do so, I think, primarily to obtain planning permission rather than any other reason. If the SUDs became a directive, you maybe don't have the answer, but would you be able to, maybe for the next meeting, supply to the committee what the extra costs are likely to be for a house owner where SUDs have been incorporated into a house? Because that's going to be a factor that the developers will say.
We'd be happy to say something about that on the 22nd, because it's relevant to the legislation proposals we're bringing forward. It is one of the issues, is how you do ongoing maintenance And Gleneffy, without going into too much detail in time, Gleneffy seemed to have got some solutions to that, which I hadn't been aware of before.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I suppose the other side of that as well, I mean, David's making a point in terms of the homeowner's responsible for that, but if they actually don't do it, the homeowner's actually the ones actually paying for the infraction as well. Sean?
Thanks, Chair. Robert, you mentioned when the roof was being restored that was an opportunity, but that the finance minister hadn't bought in. What ideas had you? Was it because of was his rejection of it? Was it because of the cost?
Our minister wrote to him a few months ago, and we were simply seeing Stormont as a possible opportunity to demonstrate some of the SUD's ideas, and there are some opportunities here. For example, I think there are some of the playing fields are going to be relayed and so on. So, and anything we can actually save reduce the risk of flooding downstream. But it wasn't, I think, to be fair to the finance minister, he was aware that considerable money had gone into flood defences in the Stormont estate, and I think we hadn't perhaps maybe explained in detail what we were hoping to do, because it was a preliminary letter simply inviting him to engage in a discussion on the point. And we haven't gone back yet. It's possible that our minister would decide to do that. I mean, the point about the flood defence investment, sadly, is that while that will protect the government buildings, it just moves the water more quickly down into the sewer and increases almost the risk of pressure on the system further down. So we're happy to do that, but we felt that there was more to be done. We are looking for another area to demonstrate some of these, and NI Water has put a couple in various places, but we really want an area we can do a number of different things and see what works best.
And just on a point, Chair, so it would be more beneficial if there was a cross-departmental approach to this issue.
That's exactly what the briefing today really was about, although I've strayed a bit from where I started. But the Interdepartmental Programme Board, and that has Agriculture for Rivers Agency, Environment, DRD ourselves, DFP are going to be part of that as well. And the idea is that out of that we will have a plan that involves all of those interests and all those responsibilities.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, John? Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. There's two major problems or challenges: flooding and water quality. And NI Water business plan says that we need £750 million of investment to respond to those two challenges. But you've mentioned it's over a period of time. So what period of time is that investment over?
Okay. Can I first say there is a third challenge, and I don't want to us to forget it, because if we have a system that is operating at capacity or close to it, you can't connect new businesses in. So the economic growth challenge is there as well. But the investment timescale, we won't know until we produce a plan. Some of this could get off the ground fairly quickly if we come up with the answers that say, look, this is something we have to do anyway. Indeed, some of the investment in the 6 years might well be useful for this. But if you're looking at, say, completing it, to have it all done, you're probably looking at an investment timescale of 10 to 12 years. Okay. And we believe that you do need a longer investment horizon for this kind of infrastructure anyway.
And how do you think that's going to be financed?
Well, I haven't given thought to the finance of it yet. At this stage, we propose us to develop the plan and put together an interdepartmental approach to that. Financing could only be addressed once we have a clearer understanding of what would be involved in that programme of work.
Okay. Have you a timescale for completion of the plan?
The actual plan, if we're talking about completing the plan in its entirety, we're looking at probably 3-ish years, maybe. Within that, we will have emerging conclusions. Some things we will say, whatever we do, we're going to need, for example, an upgrade of Belfast wastewater treatment works. So it may be that some individual projects can be hived off and taken forward more quickly in that.
And did I understand you right in terms of those EU directives? Or it's going to be basically impossible to avoid breaching those directives then?
It will be very difficult to avoid the commencement of infraction proceedings in relation to the Water Framework Directive specifically. NI Water is currently complying with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which measures the quality coming out of its wastewater treatment works. But the problem with the Water Framework Directive, it measures the quality in Belfast Lough, which is where the water took a detour and went into the watercourse and into.
At what point would those proceedings lead to fines?
Hard to say. It depends how much the Commission is intent with what we're proposing to do. The Commission can move to the European Court to get fines levied at any point in time. Our expectation from experience in the north coast of Ballycastle is that providing we're making progress, they wouldn't be rushing to the court to seek fines. And certainly Clonethy, there's no expectation of any fines. But in Whitburn, in England, they're being fined heavily for having effectively done nothing until too late. So the risk is a real risk.
You're operating at risk until a significant plan's in place, which is going to require significant investment either way. Yeah.
And happily, the significant investment can be over time. It doesn't need a massive quick injection.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think all members are content. We'll leave it at that. Sure, you're back up again on
Back on the 22nd on the water bill.
Okay.
Happy to say
Thank you.
with them. Yep.
Okay, members agenda item number 7.
Quality of water there.
Refer members to page 93 in their pack and page 67 of their table papers. Can we welcome so we'll have Sean, Michael and Neil. You'll see we're pushing for time here now, so if we can have a brief presentation of this. All right. Okay, Sean, are you leading off?
I'm leading off. Very briefly, thank you very much for the opportunity. We sent up a paper earlier. I think somebody has got slides which we were going to use as the basis just of summarising the key messages from the paper that you've already got. Michael will kick us off. Michael's been doing most of the work on the integrated pilot in Dungannon, and then Neil Birch from Sistra will talk us through the work that we're doing on how we might take this further and roll it out across the country. Okay. So I'll pass over to Michael initially.
Morning all. Probably just very briefly, worth reminding everybody of the aims of the pilot project on slide 1. And they are essentially to prove the concept of service integration by trialling the more efficient use of publicly funded passenger transport resources involving various combinations of service providers. They are also, importantly, to provide improved travel options for users, particularly in rural areas, to evaluate those options for the wider implementation of service integration, and again, importantly, to assess the implications for passengers, for operators and for the funding organisations. And then lastly, just to plan how wider implementation can actually be delivered. The third slide refers to the key stakeholders. I'll not run through those other than to say we have previously sort of emphasised the importance of all of the key stakeholders involved in the project, and effectively of having everybody around the one table discussing issues that are common to them about transport with a view to improving things. But the list is made up essentially of funders of public transport and providers. In terms of actually progress on the ground and what we have been able to do by way of operational changes, there are a number of key ones here. If I could maybe just highlight the Clogher Valley bus service, and this will be a particularly important one. What we're planning in the Clogher Valley area is the introduction of a local bus service at the beginning of November 14, and we will be using the SELB resources to deliver that service. Effectively, it will be covering the rural roads around Oher and Clogher, and then transporting people into Dungannon. And that's a really important exercise in the sense of using resources more flexibly, regardless of who owns them. In this case, it's the SELBs, but it's using those resources outside of what their core business is. And it also will be important in terms of actually making an informed assessment of the user need in the area. The daytime opportunities placements, we have been working closely with the Health Trust and with Community Transport to look at what type of solutions we can come up for with people who are on the daytime opportunity scheme. And those are people who would otherwise be going to daycare centres, but in this case are now being given the opportunity to go out into the community and attend local facilities, whether they be in leisure centres or whatever. So transport is an issue there. You'll all recall, or most of you will recall, the engagement we had with Lockery last December. On the back of that then, there's been a tweak or a number of tweaks to the TransLink timetable to provide better access to that particular site. Another opportunity then for using resources more flexibly is being taken forward through community transport doing school service in the Castle Caulfield area. And again, that's a good example of integration. They're doing that in the morning time, then on the return journey into the town, they're picking up members who want to transport back into Dungannon. So that's real integration, I suppose, actually in motion as such. And then just to highlight one other, which was the review of the school services that I have spoken to the committee about a number of times, which effectively was looking at how school services delivered by TransLink and the Education and Library Board could be delivered more efficiently. In terms of other key developments and the wider implementation, I just want to talk very briefly about the data collection exercise. And that started, I suppose, really in May of this year, where we were collating information from all of the providers on data such as vehicles, drivers, volunteers, costs, and that was across TransLink, the trusts, the boards and community transport. It was an extensive exercise that has taken some time to deliver, but needless to say, we have had a few challenges along the way, but we now have the vast majority of that information. We've also been looking at some of the service and passenger information for 3 of the council areas in Dungannon, Coleraine and Fermanagh. And Sistra, who will speak to you shortly through Neil, they've been appointed to analyse all of the data that's been collected and, importantly, to identify some of the integration opportunities, some of the options, quantify some of the benefits, and identify the practicalities for the wider implementation. And then lastly, on my slides, just to touch on the project evaluation and the economic appraisal. And at the previous discussion with the committee, we had indicated a timeline of the end of 2014 to deliver on the project evaluation and the economic appraisal. That's still very much the plan. We're working towards that as we talk. The economic appraisal, it will consider the most sustainable and the long-term delivery model solutions. And then the analysis by Sistra on the economic appraisal, well, effectively that will be used to try and get the buy-in from the funding departments and the ministers. So on that note, I'd just like to hand over to Neil Birch to take us through some of the work that Sistra have been taking forward and some of their plans for work that still has to be done.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And conscious of time and that we'll want to get some time for some questions, I'll run through what we've been doing as briefly as I can do, and happy to then take questions after that. Obviously, one of the most important things to establish, first of all, is what are the building blocks in the pilot areas that we've been looking at. So, who's actually providing transport services at the moment, and what volume of resources available to be used. So that's been the exercise that Michael's been talking about, that's been underway since May. Another element which Michael also touched upon is that there's a huge range of different stakeholders involved, not just the transport providers, but also the people who are making or representing people who are making use of the transport services, and it's important to understand what their views and aspirations are. Because transport is a very emotive subject, and as we move towards making changes to how transport is delivered and how people are transported, we need to make sure that we're actually carrying all those stakeholders along with us. Some of the key areas for consideration, it should be slide 9, I think, in the pack that you've got. But again, I'll run through this very briefly.
Sorry, it's slide 5.
Okay, doubled up. Sorry, my apologies. The 9th slide, which is on page 5.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are existing conventional stage carriage bus services being operated by Ulsterbus, and we want to make sure that they are used to their maximum efficiency. The next step of the process is to look at how school children are being transported to the different schools in the pilot areas that we've been looking at, and go through an exercise of looking for overlaps and inefficiencies within that. But then moving on from that to look for synergies with some of the other forms of transport provision in the areas that we've been studying. So looking in particular at community transport and looking at synergies for transport that's being provided by on behalf of the health trusts. But also being very conscious of the fact that already I've mentioned 4 different bodies who are involved there in delivering transport. and that we need to think about what those future arrangements will be in order to optimise the use of the pool of resources which is available. So our approach has been very much to take a clean sheet approach, if you like, to start from basic building blocks, who needs to travel, and where are they wanted to travel to, how can we most effectively provide for those mandatory travel requirements, and then look at what that means in terms of the resources that are available and how they can then be best used to provide for some non-mandatory forms of transport. And look at working across all 4 of those existing silos that I mentioned previously. So just to look, again, it's the 11th slide, which will be page 6, I think. Yes, in fact, the 2 slides there really are the core of what's emerging from the work that we're doing at the moment. What we've identified is that within those 4 transport providers, generally speaking, they're using the resources that are available to them in the most efficient way that they possibly can do. But where there are emerging opportunities is actually where we start to merge those needs and look at them from a clean sheet. So if we take, if we split the day between the school day, which is when the vast majority of transport resource is required, and the sort of non-school period of the day. If we look at the school day, what's most important is to make the most efficient use of the vehicles that are being vehicles and drivers that are being used to transport pupils to and from school at those periods of time. And what we've identified is that there are some modest opportunities to make economies and by merging the operations of the ELB and the Ulster Bus school services. But what also is emerging is that, and in fact you can see it on the graph on the penultimate slide there, is that because of the heavily peaked nature of transport in areas such as the ones we've been looking at, there's actually a huge pool of resources which are not being used between, broadly speaking, something like about 9:30 in the morning and 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And what is emerging is that there are a number of opportunities that can be grasped to make better use of those resources to provide an enhanced service. And what we're now starting to work through is exactly what the style of those enhanced services might be. We think that will be a mixture of probably more an enhanced network of conventional fixed route services, just as TransLink are providing already, but also making use of some of the resources that are available to provide a more demand-responsive network. I think we need to make one point, or a couple of points. One is that one of the particular challenges involved in that is that the vehicles that are used for school transport and the optimum type of vehicle that's used for school transport is not necessarily the optimum type of vehicle to be used for demand-responsive transport. And the second point to be made is that transport is inherently a local need and needs to be delivered locally. So what works in one of the pilot areas might not necessarily work in another pilot area, and we need to be responsive and flexible in terms of meeting those demands. But what is emerging is that there's quite clearly going to be a pool of resource which can be made use of to provide locally tailored, bespoke answers to local needs. Very briefly, just in terms of the next steps, we're working through 3 pilot projects. We'll use the emerging results from that to identify which of those concepts, which I've sort of very briefly spoken about there, have traction and are something that can be taken forward, and then also undertake an exercise to scale that up so that we get some idea of what might actually be delivered if we applied those principles on for the whole of Northern Ireland. As part of that, just finally at the end, just to try and identify how, having identified what this great vision for future transport is outside of Belfast, How do we actually get there? What elements do we need to put in place? And what are the challenges that will be faced along the road that need to be addressed? So very, very briefly, that's the work that we're doing.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Michael, you did say in terms of your part of the presentation that some of this work you tried to do yourselves, but then you've brought Sistra on board. Why were they not brought on from the outset?
Well, when we started the exercise in December 2012, as you know, we outlined at the very beginning, the early work was really to test the concept of integration, and that's why we did the various trials in the Dungannon area with the amalgamation of the school services and with the running of the community transport, trying to use that resource more flexibly. And we had, at that stage, planned to bring in some of the transport planning specialists at the required time, which was really after those early pilots were developed and were, you know, I suppose reaching an end point, because in terms of staging it, you know, that was the sequencing of it.
And I think also
Sorry, Sean, given the internet transport is not necessarily a new concept, I mean, it's been working in the mainland. Why did it take so long to actually bring an organisation in who probably had more expertise than yourselves?
But it hasn't been working, you know, it hasn't, I mean, this sort of model hasn't been working, and everywhere's different, as Neil says. It hasn't been working just, you know, there are some examples of bits of it working elsewhere. I'm not sure there are that many great examples of it working terribly well. And we wanted to try it at a local level, first of all, to see, could we get it to work on a scale? Could we get these people? Don't forget, we were trying, it took us a while to get everybody mobilised to take part in the pilot. So we wanted to show that this is doable, this is achievable, and we can do it together. And I think that was the main reason why, you know, to bring somebody in to do work, you need to know exactly what you want them to do. And I think it took us a while to get that, to show it could be done, and then to find out exactly what we would want advisors to do.
Was that not more the area to decide whether it could be done as opposed to yourselves, given that you did, I mean, you are aware of other models in mainland that does work, albeit they're not all working, there's some that does work. But would that not have been an early indication that you had an expertise in-house that you needed Sistra to come in?
Well, we knew that already from the start, but I mean, it was the timing
you
of
didn't
it.
bring them in?
Well, no, that wasn't the case. What we did was we had always planned to bring them in, but planned to bring them in once we'd developed our specifications and got some on-the-ground examples. And also, I mean, don't forget, we had to go out then to all of these organisations and get them to hunt out lots of information. We didn't want to bounce them into, we didn't want to frighten the horses too much at the start till we get them. We wanted to start working with them first of all before we brought in people asking for loads and loads of information. We wanted them to get used to the idea that we could work together, get them started and show some successes without going at it, you know.
I think it's important to remember that the early stages of the pilot, as we have explained on a number of occasions, were very much about testing the concept of integration, and we had the necessary skills in-house to do that. And then, as I said earlier, you know, it was the sequencing of it then was to bring Sistra in at the required time.
Okay.
So we judged that to be around about now to meet the deadline at the end of the year.
Okay, Sean?
Thanks, Chair. Just in overall terms, then, the Dungannon pilot scheme's going since 2012?
Well, the initial engagement, which was really about getting the stakeholders around the table, was at the end of 2012, December 2012.
And initially, one of the difficulties, and we've spoken about this before, Michael, has been, you know, all of the different providers and stakeholders fully engaging, and there was difficulties with the health, EHSS engaging. We didn't even know what they didn't even know or couldn't even provide to this committee what exactly their journeys were. Are they now fully engaged in that? And in overall terms, in those couple of years, how can you quantify positive achievements that it has been? I know at one time there was it was quantified by a number of children having moved from one mode of transport onto another. Where's that today?
Okay, well, a couple of things. Firstly, in terms of stakeholder engagement and health, over the past couple of years, all of the organisations involved in the pilot have worked closely together, collaboratively, and without that engagement and that communication, we wouldn't have been able to make the changes on the ground that we have made. and I think probably the stakeholder event last December, I'm sure the committee will recall the discussions with the stakeholders, and that was very much evidenced through that session. In terms of what has been achieved, I suppose really the early stages of the pilot were never going to be groundbreaking in terms of making huge efficiencies or making huge gains. What it was about testing the concept of integration, which we have done in a small way, but yet that then allows you to build on that, to scale it up over a wider area and to build the evidence on that basis. So it has been very much a staged approach, but very much on the basis of gathering the evidence as we go along, see what works well, take that forward, what things that don't work well, well then, then that you can learn the lessons from those particular issues.
And I think health is such a complex, as you all know, it's so complex, but they have a lot to gain from this. And we've spent a lot of time getting solutions for the daytime opportunities. People, who are travelling some places because it's new, excuse me, they're travelling quite a long distance in some cases, so the transport needs are quite complex. So they have a lot to be gained. The health service have a lot to gain from being part of it, but we want them to be part of the solution, and we need their buses and all of that, and their drivers to be part of it as well. So we don't want them to just say, well, it's over to community transport, because the community transport can't absorb it all. We want them to be part of the solution.
Yeah, we all have a lot to gain because there's a huge amount of public money goes into travel.
Yeah.
Both the school, community, and all of that. And and there are some successful. We have been in Scotland and Glasgow, and there's been some very successful concepts of this. But is there now a broader plan to roll this out into the rest of the north within the department?
Well, that's what the work that Neil's doing at the moment, and out of that will hopefully come proposals on how we might do it. And I think we'll still have a challenge of getting, we took us a while to get everybody bought in to get started. I think when the hard decisions will come when we say, and here's how we think we could do it more widely. So I think there will be some challenges because it will involve pooling resources. Now, whether you pool them, how you pool them, it will be up for debate, I'm sure. But without pooling the resources, and we've proven that with the daytime opportunities, we can't, our department, with the small amount of money we give to community transport, can't do it on its own. So we need all the resources at our disposal to do it properly. So there'll be a bit of hard decisions to be made then, turn of the year, early next year. I don't know how long it'll take people to make up their mind, but it's not a done deal yet. We hope that they will all play their part, but and so far, in fairness to everybody who's been part of the pilot, for the most part, we've got a good level of cooperation. But the big challenge is yet to come, where we say, I could have put a hoarse throat. Neil his work comes to fruition. We will want to test that before we take it too far with people involved, the stakeholders, and see that it's doable.
Yeah, well, I want to make a comment. I know it will be difficult because we were down in Dublin. It is difficult. We need to be not together, otherwise it will not happen. Just a comment.
Yeah, Sean, in terms of the whole thing, I'm just trying to get my head around this. Is there going to be savings in terms of, is there going to be cost implications? You're 2 years in this pilot. You should fit the answer to that at this stage.
Well, that's what we're working towards the economic appraisal for. Whether there would be, it depends on how much we try to fill the trough. There's two peaks which sort of determine the costs. The number of vehicles and all of that. Depends on how further up on Neil's peaks we want to try to provide services. But we know that there will be no new money. So it depends on whether we think it's worthwhile putting on more regular services and try and promote them, whether there's more need for a community transport demand responsive type solution. So it depends on how much of that we want to do, how much we can afford to do. Plus, I think as the committee's report highlighted, there's a need for a bit of investment in maybe technology or something to make it work, to make it. So we would like to think so, but I don't. What?
You just can't answer the questions?
Not at this stage, no. The economic appraisal will answer that question.
David?
Thanks. Just a local question. Is the concept one size fits all? Will it fit into rural areas in Strangford?
I think there are probably different requirements in different areas. One of the reasons we chose Dungannon in the first instance was that it was a rural area, but we also gathered extensive data for two other council areas, which was Fermanagh and Coleraine, and that then gives us an opportunity to see what the user requirements are across a number of different areas rather than just basing it on one.
The model should work. The broad concept, the model should work. We might have to tweak it to fit particular geographic areas, but the
I
broad
don't know
model.
how much it's costing to get you this far after 2 years. I'm not too sure if the cost values of it either. Overall, I think there's some merit in what might come out of this. But if it works somewhere down there, what the natural reaction is, well, we want it.
Of course.
So it's on that basis that I'm asking is, if it can be, I take it you're not going to do all this work and fold it up and say, well, that's a waste of time. But if it's going to be done there, then obviously there's cost implications for there. I'm just asking you, are you on song to be able to cope with the demand that would come out and say, we want it?
I think the proposition is that whatever model we come up with and we agree with stakeholders as reasonable, then it would be a model that would be implementable everywhere, acknowledging that you might have to tweak it to local circumstances.
It's very useful for you to say that somewhere down the line.
Well, we will. That's the intention of the economic appraisal.
But it could be part of the promotion of what you're doing, and there's an appeal in that. And just finally, on these off-peak times, and the community use of, I don't know if this is relevant, so it's in total ignorance, but it just struck me, the community use of bus passes. They may be under threat, right? How key to all of this is the bus pass subsidy in providing transport in the area? Do you need it or do you not need it?
Do you mean the money for it?
No, the provision.
If this worked, you could see at the minute in rural areas, it's the assisted rural transport, the DARD money that pays for the bus passes for people in rural areas. Now, whether that continues or not, who knows? They may well find it difficult, but to keep funding that, we don't know at this stage. But the point is that you would have a lot more services that they could use. The complaint from people in rural areas is that we have the bus pass, but we can't use it terribly much because there's not enough services. So if we had more services, then there would be more opportunity to use it. The downside of that is we've got to find some money to fund that. So, go back to your question about savings. We need to carve out some savings to pay for some of these things, like additional people using the...
Sorry, just bear with me. What I'm trying to say is the bus pass user a major contributory factor to the financing of this? In other words, I'm not going into it too deep. Bus pass subsidies under threat unless it keeps on adding to TransLink's profits, right?
No.
So what I'm saying is, you go out now, by this time at 4 o'clock, all the bus pass users will be on the buses. That's it. You see, nobody else. All right? So if they aren't in those buses, is that form of transport out of reach to you?
No, because a lot of the buses are on the road because of the peak in the morning for the school transport and the commuting transport. And it's how, so the net cost of doing more with them it's really the fuel. Except for in some cases, some of the operators have cleverly...
Oh, I wonder could we have a report to that so we could give it to TransLink? That's absolutely brilliant. What you've just said, there's no cost at all, so TransLink are ripping us off as usual, but you're saying the net costs are very, very little.
Well, the net costs...
I agree with you, but
no, but the TransLink costs are the total costs. It's not just... And you've got to differentiate between the way TransLink do their costings, which is commercial costing, and some of the budgets that we're working with, and that's why we have to put the costings on an equal footing, in terms of doing economic appraisal.
You finished, David? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I'll call John, and I'm not just saying this because I'm calling John, but any of those who want to talk about concessionary fares, I was thinking particularly you, David, if you want to declare an interest, maybe I don't know if you're receiving it or not. We'll call John next.
Right there, sorry, I didn't do that.
If you want to declare an interest in terms of concessionary fares, no? You're not, no?
I am a bus pass.
All right.
I have a holder, but I don't use it.
All right, okay. John, you're not worried about it then?
That means he.
Pardon?
MEC's Boston.
My constituents are worried, but I'm quite happy to pay for it. But I'm just doing a pilot for you when it's your turn.
Chairperson, first of all, my appreciation to everyone who's involved in this, and full marks for the professional way in which you sell it. But Sean, realistically, you've got these nice people around the table, 4 different organisations that own buses. Has any of them indicated that they'll change the colour of the bus, hand it over to a central organisation to properly integrate transport?
Well, put it like this, nobody said we won't do it, and I think if the argument's so persuasive, and given that there isn't an abundance of money about, and given that we want to use the resources we've got as efficiently as we can, and there is some real, genuine need out there. I don't know how extensive the need. The Clogher Valley one will maybe test a bit, but I'm always a bit unclear about what degree of unmet need, because the community transport ones are not. They've cleverly organised it so that they maximum the resource, that they corral people together. So I don't know how much of unmet need there is, but we would. So we think that they'll if the argument's so persuasive, and crucially that the 3 government departments, us, education and health, are prepared to buy into it, I think that they will. If we get all the departments and ministers bought in.
To Sean, it probably would be useful if we were able to establish need. My own belief is, particularly in the rural areas, there's a lot of people experience the worst form of poverty possible, and it's not lack of money, it's isolation, it's loneliness. And the free bus passes, or whatever the concessionary fares, has demonstrated beyond doubt that older people do want to get out and about. But
I think our engagement with...
Really, at some stage, somebody is going to have to put the chips on the table and say, look, this small country cannot afford the luxury of TransLink, health service, education, labour boards and community organisers all running
buses,
their own little empires. And until we get to that stage, I accept, Chairperson, that's a useful exercise in that area. It will not transfer easily to any other area. So integrated transport, as we saw in Glasgow and Dublin and other places, is not going to happen.
I think the examples in other jurisdictions, and they were referred to earlier, the common denominator across all of this is that in Strathclyde, in the National Transport Authority in Dublin and in other areas, this is a slow process, it's a phased process, maybe slower than we would like. But I recall speaking to Eric Stewart, who's responsible for Strathclyde. They've been working at this for 8 or 9 years, and his advice to us was, listen, go slowly, build your evidence, take it stage at a time, and at the end of it, you will have an integrated transport system. It may not be a fully fledged, as fully fledged as you would like, but you will definitely identify opportunities to make improvements. And I think what we have seen is, with 2,500 drivers, with over 2,500 vehicles, that there are clearly opportunities across all of the providers to do things better, and that's what we're working towards.
I would think, Michael, even before you started the study, any of us around this room would have thought there was merit in the project, particularly us in rural constituencies, given that people are isolated and find difficulties getting to major towns.
Yeah.
And because the other partners that you're referring to weren't necessarily, I mean, they maybe be belatedly coming to the table now.
Yes.
People were relying on TransLink. TransLink's routes to isolated areas are poor to...
Yeah. They couldn't get up the roads. A lot of the buses wouldn't go up the roads.
Well, but I think no, I would never defend them to that extent. They can get up the roads into to small villages. The problem is, because the numbers were so small, they wouldn't put enough routes on. But then you had school buses going, you had the health service buses going. There is isolated communities there, and really, I mean, I'm sure members would all agree, we would like to see something working. But I have to say, I'm a wee bit concerned that sometimes a pilot can run too long. We can actually test the water for too long to try and basis evidence. I think the evidence out there in terms of us who come from isolated communities that they actually need an integrated transport system to get them into our major towns.
I agree with that, Chair. I'm from a very rural area myself, and the exercise that we have been running with Clogher Valley has been very informative, because the type of user requirements that there are exactly what you're describing, and that's why we hope that by doing this local service in that area, we'll be able to build the evidence and say, right, there's clearly a user need in that area. We're going to use the resources more flexibly, and that could be something then you could build on and, you know, develop into a model in the longer term.
You know, we can jest about concessionary fares as well, and it's only jest because it is it's a necessity in terms of people, particularly in the rural communities again, because it's a lifeline for some of those who can't afford, coming from, you know, particularly poor backgrounds, who can't afford. But it's actually a lifeline to get them to these other areas, and social integration and all the rest. So, I mean, other than that, they would be isolated in their own homes.
Chairperson, just in conclusion,
Any Canada be giving everybody a bike so they can drive down to the bus? Don't worry, that's how they'll subsidise it.
Chairperson, on a serious note, I do think we should thank the three gentlemen for their presentation, except that there is progress there on the clear understanding that there's a lot more to do, and I would please encourage them to continue with it.
Absolutely. Call Chris there, sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks for your presentation, gentlemen. I know you've said you have to take it in stages, but are there other geographical areas in mind for any other type of exploration of this type of integration?
I think in the first instance, if we were going to scale it up, we would do it across the whole of the Dungannon Council area. You might then look at somewhere like Fermanagh that would have a slightly different need, possibly Coleraine, which would have the benefit of a major hospital, a major university, and a lot of passenger need in that particular area. So we would have to decide what areas, but that would be the plan and the approach.
One of the difficulties we'll face is lumping not just the money but the people. You know, we've drivers from the three organisations, and they're all on very different rules of engagement in terms of terms and conditions. So that's going to be one of the biggest challenges I suspect we are going to face early on. Now, we're going to have to try to smooth over to get it over the first hurdle as to how we do that, and you know, we'll need just some fancy thoughts on how we do that. I mean, the concept, you know, I can't get over the thought that nearly every village in the country has got a primary school, or two in some cases, and there's minibus or buses all around those roads, and they're available to bring people in when they're not. They might do an odd school run or a dinner run at something at lunchtime, but the rest of the time they're available in the local community, so why not use them? It's simple. It's simple to say, it's perhaps not so simple to do, because everybody's on different rules of engagement and different terms and conditions and different pay.
Well, certainly, as John has said, I mean, you do need encouragement to continue in the work, but certainly, I mean, whilst it's a pilot scheme, I would like to see, personally, that's my own opinion, that I would certainly like to see it out. I think some brave decisions need to be made in terms of your department and other departments in terms of how you actually integrate it, but I actually don't think there needs to be an awful lot of evidence gathering to prove that it works, because as you have said again, even in your last remarks, if you take the school buses as one example, running around villages, there is an awful lot of transport there and that could be used, and it could facilitate. So I encourage you to continue in terms of the work, but try and get us to a conclusion where we can see some developments across Northern Ireland as opposed to just pilot schemes.
I agree. I mean, the test will come in the new year.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so if we can leave it there.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Darren, sorry.
That's okay. Chris can touch on what I've got to ask him.
Sorry, Darren.
That's okay.
Okay, members, so we'll move on.
Thank you.
Okay, members, agenda item number 8, SR 2014-228, the private crossing signs and barriers regulations, Northern Ireland 2014. Can I refer members to page 101 in their pack? The committee considered this SL1 at its meeting on the 10th of September, and no issues were raised. The order has subsequently appeared without comment, and the examiner of statute rules, which can be found in table papers. So we'll put the question that the Committee for Regional Development has considered SR 2014-228, the private crossings, signs and barriers regulations, Northern Ireland 2014, and no objection to the rule. Right? Okay, agenda item number 9, SR 2014-229, the level crossing McConaughey's Order, Northern Ireland 2014, which is again that's on page 131 in your pack. The members, the committee did consider this SL1 at its meeting on the 10th of September also, and no issues were raised. The order subsequently appeared without comment, and the examiner statutory rules report. Can we put the question again that the Committee for Regional Development has considered SR 2014-229, the level crossing McConaughey's Order, Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objection to the rule? Agreed. Okay. Agenda item number 10 is any other business. So if there's no other business, members can remind you the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday the 15th of October at 10 a.m. Maybe I should say actually before, could I put on record, Chair, or Clerk, or could we suggest maybe to the Assembly Commission in terms of this room, I don't know what the other members feel, but the noise and the acoustics in it is poor, the noise of the tables, and I'm not saying we can't actually sit tied to our one position, but whenever individuals are given presentations, the noises coming from the desks are very distracting, and I certainly would like to put on record from my own experience that it's actually difficult sometimes to hear, and we can't physically tie members in one position in a chair. I mean, these desks are atrocious. So.
I agree with you, Chair. Obviously, we make adjustments to what's available, but certainly in terms of space and sound, I noticed that myself today as well. Yeah.
It is difficult just in terms of desks.
Yeah.
But if we can pass that on, maybe. So next Wednesday, 15th, meeting's now closed. Adjourned.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 21.